The Simagic Alpha Evo Sport might be the best hardware I've used at its price point. It has an amazing quick release that is better than Logitech's or Fanatec's older QR1. The build quality is fantastic and rivals products twice its price. Not to mention, Simagic has a fantastic ecosystem with a swath of different options. And yet, until I tweaked the settings for this PC-only wheelbase to the ends of the earth, I hated driving with it. First, we really need to talk about what Simagic did right here, because there truly is a lot to love here. In the box, you get the base, USB cables, power supply, and some mounting hardware. Now, something we need to talk about this base in particular, is although it includes the hardware you need to bottom mount it, unlike the older Simagic bases, this wheelbase cannot natively be front mounted, meaning you're going to have to buy an accessory to do so. Now that aside, in the hand, this wheelbase feels fantastic. Its fit and finish is excellent, and it just feels really well put together. There's no creaks, no rattles, no clunks, nothing. The quality of this base doesn't just end with the metal base itself. The quick release is fantastic. This is an energy style quick release like the one Moza uses, and the action and everything about it is really good. Now, there's a little bit more going on here than just a basic metal quick release. Simagic has added their own proprietary pins to the front of this quick release that lets it wirelessly communicate with their own lineup of products, meaning there is no need for cables or anything really messy like that. Now, it is well worth noting, even though the mounting hardware itself is identical to that of a Moza wheel, you cannot simply mount a Moza wheel to this and have it work. It might seem like an exaggeration considering I've owned Simicubes, Fanatec's, Logitech's, and whatnot, but this really is, by far, the best quick release system I've ever used. Its action is excellent, it's smooth, there's absolutely no play in it. My previous Logitech RS50 actually had a pretty sizable clunk in its quick release, and same goes with my old Fanatec QR1. Talking about features for a second, on the back of the base there are 4 USB CAN bus ports and a USB-C port that pretty much just acts like a USB hub. You can use this for plugging in third-party wheels like that Cube Controls F-Core behind me. Now, personally, this wouldn't be my use case for this port, as Simagic sells for not a whole lot more than just a normal quick release, a USB pass-through quick release, and it's just a lot more elegant of a solution than routing it around your wheel into the back of the base and then trying to figure out what the heck to do with the rest of the cable. Now, moving to the front of the base, there are a few additional features. There are metal contact pins that Simagic says they're going to be making accessories for in the future. Now, right below those pins, there's a circular RGB light, and this can light up in all sorts of different colors, or you can turn it off altogether. Now, this light can be a little bit useful, like it can act as a lockup light, it can tell you when you're in ABS, or maybe if you're sitting in traction control. But most of the time, if you have a wheel with a screen on it, it's going to get blocked. Although it's far from a bad thing, I have a really hard time saying it's a selling point. It's just kind of there. Now, we've talked quite a bit about the features of this wheelbase, but we really haven't talked a whole lot about the specs or really much about it. Now, it's a 9mm wheelbase, which is right in line for the $399 price tag that it carries. It competes directly with the Fanatec CSL DD with the boost kit and the Moza R9. Which, honestly, on paper, it holds up really well to those two bases. With the motor powered off, it feels incredibly smooth. There is no real noticeable cogging or any kind of graininess to note. It's a spectacularly smooth motor mechanically, a good chunk smoother than the Fanatec CSL DD that I had before, and honestly, I think a little bit smoother than the Logitech RS50 I reviewed earlier. One thing I did notice about this base is there is a little bit of noise that comes from the slip ring. Now, in case you don't know, the slip ring is how they pass data from the quick release to the base. So the noise is really not noticeable when you're driving. While we're on the topic of sound, this base is actively cooled. It has a fan in the back. Now, although this base does get somewhat warm, I never really heard the fan while I was sim racing, and I just don't think it's going to be a big deal. It's not a terribly noisy base once you adjust the settings, as we'll talk about later. Now, these days when you buy a wheelbase, you're not really just buying the base itself. You're really buying into the company's ecosystem as a whole. After all, if you have a complete dead-end ecosystem, you can have a good initial experience, but absolutely no upgrade path later on if you want a more powerful base. And I'm glad to say Simagic has a fantastic ecosystem overall. There are budget-oriented formula rims like this GT Neo, there are budget round rims, there are nice round rims, there are expensive full carbon formula rims, not to mention they have a pretty extensive lineup of pedals ranging from load cells to hydraulics. Plus, you're not just stuck with this 9mm base, they go all the way up to 25, 24nm, it's like crazy. Now, we've said a lot of good things about this base, but it's time to put it on the rig and drive. And this is where there's a lot of good and a decent amount of bad. So getting it set up on the rig was pretty simple. There was absolutely no issue with the software, everything updated and set up perfectly fine. And in my time with it, it's been dead reliable. So it's not like the issues I had with the Logitech RS50. Where I have issues with this base is in how the force feedback is conveyed. For starters, I tried iRacing, and I know, there's more sims out there than just iRacing, but it is the sim that I'm especially familiar with, so it's my de facto test sim, as I've tried everything from my old G29 up to the Simagic 2 Sport I had. And I did have some pretty decent gripes about this wheel on iRacing. Out of the box, iRacing now defaults to 360Hz force feedback. On my Simagic 2 Sport, this was great. I actually quite liked it. I understand at the time it was quite divisive, as it is interpolation. Now, quick note about interpolation. iRacing's force feedback is only at 60Hz, so 60 times a second it refreshes. Now, they give an API to manufacturers where they can interpolate that and get it up to 360 times a second, so on paper, a lot more detail. By its very nature, interpolation adds delay. On my Simagic 2 Sport, I did not have any noticeable delay. I have not heard anybody complain of delay on those wheelbases. However, when I booted up this Simagic Alpha Evo Sport, I was constantly losing the rear end and I felt like I was just always chasing something. Like, it didn't feel like I was driving proactively, it felt like I was driving reactively. It's like the car was already going by the time I felt it. And that's not really my previous experience with any of my direct drive bases. It's not that the motor couldn't do it. It's a very, very quick motor. It can turn into a slide plenty fast enough. But the Simagic 360Hz interpolation just added a noticeable amount of delay. And I really didn't feel like I could properly evaluate this base until I turned it off. When I turned off 360Hz, the experience was completely different. There was no weird delay in the force feedback. There was no artificially really weird feeling force feedback details. And overall, the experience was a whole lot more pleasant than the out-of-the-box experience. I do not know why there's not just a tick in the iRacing menus to disable 360Hz. You actually have to go into the controls INI and disable it there. Now, although disabling 360Hz really felt like a breath of fresh air with this wheelbase, I still didn't get the detail and the feeling out of the space that I really wanted. Initially, it felt a little bit over smoothed and a little bit slow to react to slides. Now, the reaction was quite fast, but it didn't correct enough, if that makes any sense. It's like it would start turning into the slide and then start slowing down, almost like it was attempting to not overcorrect. And in the end, it felt like I was having to help it along at times in correcting oversteer. Now, I need to note that the force feedback for feeling understeer is very pronounced and quite well represented on this base. I personally found that there wasn't a whole lot of feeling for the tire sidewall, which, oh my god, I'm being crazy pedantic. Now, I understand this is a really high level complaint, but I still think it's worth bringing up. If you're going to spend $400+, I'd rather tell you everything I noticed about this base. Now, with that out of the way, I want to touch on one more topic about this base, and inform you that I am currently on the version 2.2.3 firmware in case they do end up updating this. This base is still ridiculously smooth. Like, the force feedback in the motor is just crazy smooth. However, I have never used a wheelbase that I can mess up more with like one button click. Like, if I turn the wheel speed down or I choose like a wacko setting, then it just feels super grainy. This is a base that you really have to take your time and care in terms of setting it up. I'm going to end up posting my settings right up here, so that way you can copy them down and get a general idea of what I'm running so you have a decent jumping off point. Although I was able to get into a pretty decent sweet spot in terms of detail and whatnot, there was one area that I found this base to be a little bit lacking, and that would be in cases of neutral steer. When I talk about neutral steer, I mean when the car is currently experiencing a pretty decent four-wheel slide. You can hold the wheel straight and you'll still be rounding the corner. In this transitions phase, where you can either get out of it with maybe a little bit less throttle, or maybe you need to turn into a little bit more, I found on center this base to be a little bit numb for my liking, and I found myself pretty consistently sawing at the wheel to try and see, like, what am I feeling? Is this gonna go? Do I need to have a big moment, or is it just gonna be a little bit of a moment? You know, it just wasn't communicating that to me overly well. I think it maybe is a lack of feeling for the car's weight. And weirdly enough, I kind of fixed it with a big cardinal sin. I ended up turning off linear mode, and linear mode for any decently powerful direct drive should not be turned off. Linear mode punches up subtle forces for wheelbases that just don't have that much power. And when I turned off linear mode, it completely fixed my issue with that feeling. Like, I had fantastic feeling. I could drive the car on the rear tires super aggressively without issue. So in essence, in turning off 360 hertz, dialing in the FFB, and turning off linear mode, I went from barely being able to catch a slide with this base to setting some of my fastest lap times ever. Now yes, linear mode comes with some drawbacks. It definitely muddies some details. The reason why I tested this to begin with is I just can't help but feel this base could be amazing. It could be class leading, absolutely, without a doubt. With some firmware updates, it's decent as is. It's probably the best overall package I've tried in this price point. I think this base is a really solid buy as is, especially at some of the sale prices I've seen it for. But with a solid firmware update, it could obliterate everything in its price category. Overall, the base is really solid. It doesn't have the absolute best force feedback I've ever tried, but it has super solid build quality, a robust port selection, great ecosystem, and it's very competitively priced. Yes, I think the force feedback could be improved. It's not bad by any means, don't get me wrong. If you're coming from any kind of belt drive wheel, a G29 or the like, this thing's gonna blow your freaking mind. Well, if you like my review, please don't forget to like and subscribe to Brake Racing. We would really appreciate it. We're trying to grow the channel. But please let us know what you think in the comments below. If you have this space, what do you think of it? Have you found some settings that you really enjoy? What is your experience? Let me know in the comments below. And as always, you can learn more on braketrace.com.